There has been a recent wave of tons of recreations of classic arcade machines. Little tiny ones that you can fit in your pocket, and much bigger ones like the things we've seen from Arcade 1-Up. And folks, everyone out there in the comments has constantly told us that MAME cabinets are better. Well, I can't build a MAME cabinet. I'm not really good with woodwork, but a company I know is, and they're called Man Cave Arcade. They loaned us one of their machines for a couple of weeks so that we could take a look at it and kind of see what you can get in 2019 with a brand new MAME cabinet. What you're looking at here is a custom-built arcade cab that breaks off into two individual pieces so that it can be a bar top machine or a standing machine. All major components for the system are in the bar top piece, and it's ultra easy to separate the two units. This makes it simple to move the unit around in apartments or bring it to different locations in general, which is a big advantage over traditional style arcade cabinets. And despite the pieces being individual, there are no screws or latches attaching the two devices at all, but it still feels incredibly stable, and you would never guess that the two pieces could actually be separated. This is one of Man Cave Arcade's cheapest models, and it runs off of a Raspberry Pi 3. Man Cave can provide a custom OS image, or you can find or make one yourself. The TV sizes range from 19 to 24 inches, and we're using the smallest available screen, and it works wonderfully. You don't really need the highest resolution screen to run older video games, and you'd likely not see a huge difference even if you had one. Basically, what you're getting here is an off-the-shelf LCD panel, and you're not getting an old-school CRT screen, and honestly, I don't think that would really work well in this instance. Mostly because, when it comes to CRTs, they're getting a lot older, and for modern MAME systems, you're likely going to want a screen that's actually digital. The cabinet itself has two arcade sticks with 6 buttons per player. You also have start, select, and an insert coin button for each player as well. Just above the monitor is a custom light-up marquee that you can basically choose any design for, as well as vinyl stickers that wrap around the entire body of the machine, also completely done by Man Cave Arcade. The bottom portion has a cabinet where you can store accessories, controllers, or systems, or just about anything you'd want. Another thing I really like about this Man Cave Arcade cabinet build is that at the very bottom you have these metal plates that are basically kick guards. Now these are important because a long time ago in normal arcades, these guards would be placed there to prevent people from actually kicking the bottom of the machines. Whether they're walking up to them or just getting frustrated while playing, with these guards in place you should be able to keep this cabinet lasting a lot longer, especially if you're dealing with some angry players. Because this cabinet is using an off-the-shelf TV with built-in speakers, this cabinet doesn't actually have any external speakers because it just makes use of the ones that are actually built into the television. With that said, the TV housed in the unit sounded pretty good. Other than that, there is no external sound built into the system, and volume control is operated from the television remote. But I personally would have preferred a built-in speaker solution with a volume dial somewhere on the cabinet, but because this is a custom build, you could just request something like that to be designed on your system if you chose to buy one from Man Cave Arcade. You'll also find that when you want to start the machine, it isn't done by a single button or switch. Instead, you switch on a power bar and separately turn on the Raspberry Pi. This boot sequence can take several minutes, and when you turn off the system, you have to safely power it down to ensure that you don't corrupt the operating system image. Now, I would prefer a single button startup and power off solution, but unfortunately that isn't the case with this specific build. Like I said earlier, this system is running off a Raspberry Pi 3, so we're using an image that's basically RetroPie, and that's kind of what you're going to get out of this machine. We ran tons of games for a variety of different systems, primarily to test out what this system could be capable of, and as you can imagine, a Raspberry Pi 3 is capable of running a number of systems and games, but it can't run everything. In general, you should be able to run every home console released before 1994 with very few issues. We've looked at several devices like this in the past, and because the sheer amount of options that RetroPie provides, you can really customize the way these games will look by using filters and even incorporating borders for games that were originally presented in 4x3. And this is kind of an important factor because a lot of these games are not widescreen. In fact, I'd like to say most of them, 99%, are not going to be in widescreen. With RetroPie, all the settings are accessible with joystick controls and don't require any additional inputs like a keyboard. The emulation community for many of these older systems have done a fantastic job at replicating those original consoles and software, and your only real limitation will likely be on the controller methods that are used. You could always just plug in an external controller into your Raspberry Pi board in the back of the system, but why would you want to do that when you have arcade controls directly in front of you? Which, for most people out there that are getting a machine like this, is the whole reason you would actually actually own a MAME cabinet. But with that said, arcade-style controls can be limiting depending on what system you're actually going to play and what controllers those systems originally used. But in my experience, the majority of systems out there in the most popular games will likely work with this controller layout. In our testing, we did get 3D polygonal games outside of the 32X working on this machine, like PlayStation 1 titles, but we did notice some hiccups in how the games ran. Moreover, an arcade cabinet like this simply doesn't give you an optimal controller experience for more advanced home console machines. PlayStation does run though, and depending on what games you play, you may have enough buttons with this arcade layout. But when it comes to Nintendo 64, well, that just doesn't run properly, and you don't have enough buttons to run most games. PlayStation titles fared better than Nintendo 64, but I didn't feel that any of the games really ran perfectly. And to be fair, anything beyond that generation likely isn't going to run at all. But of course, if you're picking up a system like this, you're not getting it to run console games, you're picking it up because you want an authentic arcade experience. With Raspberry Pi 3 and the latest software available, you'll be able to run a large assortment of arcade emulators and games. Anything from the mid to late 90s has a high chance of running pretty well. We went through multiple Neo Geo releases, a ton of Capcom games, Data East, Konami, and several other arcade manufacturers' titles. The ability to play these games with a layout like this is, in my opinion, way better than playing these games when emulated with standard console controllers available today. Fighting games and beat-em-ups being played side by side with a layout like this is just so much more fun. We have had a lot of experiences with original arcade machines, fight sticks, and reproduction hardware, and what Man Cave has done here feels on par with original arcade machines. The only problem you're likely going to have is running an arcade game that makes use of 3D graphics or high-intense processing features, because the Raspberry Pi 3 may not be able to run those titles properly. My recommendation for a system like this is to not use a Raspberry Pi 3. There are a ton of emulators on the scene, and some of them can be very demanding. And I believe limiting yourself to what the Raspberry Pi 3 is capable of running is doing a machine like this and its build a disservice. I feel that using a mini PC or even a much more advanced desktop system with better hardware will give you a range of options and better performance. Plus, you can get games officially right now on services like Steam. You'll find amazing games running the best way possible. For example, Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to play any of the older Street Fighter games, and in many ways this collection surpasses what the original arcade cabinets were capable of. And a collection like this can really only be run on better hardware. This monitor can be plugged into anything, whether it's a Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, or even older systems, but systems that at least have some kind of digital connection at least. You can pick up a variety of packages of games and collections that have been curated and designed to run properly on that hardware. The only problem you may run into is having the arcade stick controls work on certain consoles. A PC can virtually run anything with a USB input, which is how these controllers connect to the Raspberry Pi 3. But if you're going to make a system that runs off a specific console, you just need to make sure that you get controls that work with that system, because not everything is compatible with every system out there. One of the main reasons we're talking about this MAME system is because Man Cave Arcade and other companies like them are providing a path for people that want a more premium build for arcade hardware. Arcade1Up is another company that is currently producing cabinets with a different vision in mind. They're making a cheaper and easily purchasable hardware set that arrives in pieces that are not pre-built. We've already looked at several of these systems in greater detail in the past, and while they do have some advantages, like being officially licensed products, they're limited to running the selection of games pre-built into the hardware. Any additional games that you would want to place onto the system require modifications to the systems themselves that may require external hardware that isn't provided by the manufacturer. Arcade1Up systems are constructed well enough to last a while, but Man Cave Arcade systems are a premium build. They feel very close to the original hardware, but that of course is reflected in its price. A custom-built MAME cabinet like this can go for several times more than the price of an Arcade1Up system. But because this is custom, the price very much varies from build to build. We know that a lot of people are confused about what system they should be getting, a custom-built MAME cabinet versus units like Arcade1Up. Both systems have their own advantages and disadvantages, and while I personally like the catered experience of Arcade1Up, you can't deny the sheer breadth of customization and features that a custom MAME cabinet has to offer. In my opinion, if you can find a selection of games that you want to play that are offered by Arcade1Up, that might be the best way to go. Those systems are very cheap and very easy to build. But if you want a premium system like what Man Cave Arcade is offering, those systems can last a lot longer and they've got way more features and abilities. But that's really up to debate, and it's really all about what you want out of your arcade experience.